Another question from the website leads to another episode of Ponder This. This time, the question has to do with the Constitution and sexuality. Now, don't worry, parents. I'll keep this family friendly next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution and teach the rising generation to be free. I'm glad you could join me today. As always, head over to the website, constitutionstudy.com. That's where you'll find everything I'm doing, Constitution Study, these episodes, the audio version, articles. Keep up with the book. I think I may have found an editor soon, I'm hoping. Also, where I'm going to be speaking. So I will be in Atlanta, July 26th and 27th. So you still have time. If you're in the area, I'm going to be at the Southeast Homeschool Expo. Please, if you're there, stop by, say hello, shake my hand. I'd love to meet you face to face. I still am looking for a volunteer for Friday. Someone to help me with the booth while I'm doing other things I have to get done on that day. I have one for Saturday. I still need one for Friday. So if you're at all interested, contact me through the website. I'll pay for you to get in. I'll pay for your lunch. And we should have some interesting times while we're not only talking with each other, but with other people at the expo. Also, I want to thank everybody that's been sharing these episodes. I've seen some interesting spikes in some of the episodes. They've gotten attention. I'm glad for that. I really want to share this message out. It takes a lot of work to put these together. It takes some money to put these together too. So I'm looking for people that are not only sharing, but I'm trying to set up a way where people can help fund and support directly or indirectly what we're doing here at the Constitution Study. And I hope you'll consider joining me with that. So, as always, I love when people ask me questions. They open me up, they make me think. Now, this one happened to come through the website, although sometimes they come through comments. And the person asked the question about the legality, or maybe better put, the role of government in a person's sexuality and sexual expression. So the person asked, I was talking with a friend about homosexuality. We both agreed that it is wrong, but I was wondering whether it should be legal or not. I thought no, because as a Christian nation, we should respect what God intended for marriage. But my friend was saying that the government job is to provide justice. We have the right and freedom to marry whomever. Does the Constitution say anything about this, and should it be legal? That's really an excellent question. I like a part of the setup because what you see are two people with slightly different points of view. One is looking at the Christian history. Many of the founding fathers not only were devout Christians, they were ministers, they were pastors, they were teachers of the church. But you have another person who says, yeah, but it's about justice and what does the government have authority to tell us what to do? So let's take a couple minutes and think this through. Now, before I give my answer, take a minute and think this through for yourself. How would you answer this question? Yeah, take a few minutes, pause your playback, and consider how you would answer this person. Now, I would normally like to play the Jeopardy Think music, but I'm pretty sure it's copyrighted and I don't want to break any laws. Okay, so now that you've thought about your answer, let me give you mine. Now, in responding to this person, I noticed that reading her question, I see 2 points, both of which are worth looking at. The legal status of sexual conduct and the ability to marry. Now, while they specifically talked about homosexuality and your friend specifically referenced marriage, I think rather than picking one or the other form of behavior, I think we should consider this in the context of the question of sex as a whole, more general context. Now, while the question was specific about homosexuality, from a constitutional standpoint, it's really a question of conduct, personal conduct. Now, regardless of your opinion of sexuality and marriage, the U.S. Constitution does not give Congress any authority to write laws regarding the status of sexual behavior or the recognition of marriage. It doesn't exist. Now, since there's no federal law, neither the president nor the federal courts have any jurisdiction on the matter. Which sexual activities were permissible and which weren't had always been a state matter. Some states outlawed sodomy, others did not. Some states outlawed adultery, while others did not. And in fact, some states still have these laws on the books. It is illegal for the federal government to attempt to establish a national standard for sexual conduct. But it is also wrong for states to infringe on the rights of the people to pursue their happiness in any way they want, as long as they do not infringe on the rights of others. Now, in the matter of marriage, things get a little more complicated. You see, throughout most of Western history, marriage was a church matter, not a state one. This is a proper position of separation of church and state. If the state recognized a marriage for legal purposes, that marriage first had to be created by the church. For example, it was the church that established the boundaries for marriage, along with the ceremony. Things like, most churches did not allow polygamous marriage or underage or closely related marriages. If the state passed legislation to not recognize, for the purpose of some law, some of these marriages, that was a part of their legislative power. However, the states could not create marriage rules by law, since that would violate the separation of church and state. As I understand it, although I have not done extensive research on the topic, churches in some states push for the states to license marriage in an effort to prevent interracial and other undesirable marriages. This can be seen in part when Utah was required to outlaw polygamy before it would be allowed to enter the Union. When the state was asked to license marriage, it was just a matter of time before the state would decide it could determine the rules for such marriages. But the debate about marriage remained at the state level. Well, that was until the Supreme Court decided to place their fingers on the scales. You see, in 2015, the states were debating whether to license or recognize homosexual marriages. It started in Massachusetts, where the state Supreme Court ordered the legislature to create a same-sex marriage law. Now, I am not familiar with the Massachusetts Constitution, but I'm pretty sure that it was an illegal act to do so, since it generates the general doctrine of the separation of powers. Now, this judicial action caused concern amongst other states, especially when homosexual activists attempted to use the full faith and credit clause to force states to recognize these marriages. Full faith and credit shall be given to each state to the public acts, records, and judicial proceedings of every other state, and the Congress may by general laws prescribe the manner in which such acts, records, and proceedings shall be proved and the effect thereof. You see, most of these states had decided, usually by popular vote, to restrict marriage to one man and one woman. Although a couple like Massachusetts had homosexual marriage forced upon them by their state courts, New York was the only state I know of that at the time actually legally passed legislation to allow same-sex marriages. States are required to recognize the public acts and records of other states, and many tried to deal with this by passing legislation specifying that only certain marriages would be recognized by the state, at least as far as state law was concerned. Now, since Congress has the power to determine the effect of these public records, legislation was proposed to allow states to determine for themselves whether they would recognize out-of-state marriage licenses and under what circumstances. However, as often happens in recent decades, the Supreme Court jumped in and determined that the people had the constitutional right to marry whomever they wanted. They completely ignored not only the fact that the Constitution does not give the federal government any say in marriage. They basically violated the 10th Amendment. But they also elevated marriage to a right and violated the First Amendment and set the stage to violate the Fifth Amendment as well. You see, by assuming the authority to determine who has the right to marry, the courts paved the way for the multiple violations of religious, conscience, and speech rights that we see today. So to summarize, sex and marriage were originally state issues, until the Supreme Court stuck its nose where it didn't belong. What activities the people of a state will recognize as legitimate and how they deal with it should be a matter of that state's citizens and their representatives. If the citizens of your state wish to license certain marriage or not, that should be up to them. If they want to criminalize certain behaviors, that should also be up to them, as long as they do not violate the unalienable right of others. This standard should apply to any activity, including sexual activities. That means age of consent, incest, pedophilia, and similar laws legally are the realm of the states, not the federal government. Personally, while I have my own opinions about homosexual and other different types of marriage, I agree the state does not have the authority, or should not have the authority, to enter into your bedroom and tell you how to live your life, unless what you're doing harms or impacts somebody else. That's my bottom line. So what do you think of my answer? How close did I come to how you would have answered the question? Put your suggestions in the comments below. I'd love to see them, and I'm sure other people would like to see them as well. Remember, we aren't trying to prove that we're right. At least that should not be what we're supposed to be doing. We're trying to find the truth in the document. So thanks again to the person who sent me the question. Again, I love all questions. Head over to theconstitutionstudy.com and send yours as well. I hope I answered this person's questions, and I hope the comments that will follow will help us all think about this particular topic. See, it's by asking questions that we tend to learn the most. Well, that and making mistakes. As I like to say, there are only two stupid questions in the world: the one you don't ask and the one you ask 3 times. I hope everyone found this question thought-provoking, and I hope to see you here again next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through